Hey guys, welcome to the latest episode of the Comedy Road Podcast. I'm Jason Schuster.
I'm Lena Green.
And today we have an amazing comedian on here today, David Studebaker. He is the author of Lone Star Land. You can catch him on Sirius XM satellite radio, and he's even got a dry bar comedy special out. Everybody, let's welcome David Studebaker.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
Yes.
What is up, brother?
Thank you. You know what? That's more energy than I got in that pizza place from 80 people. You guys gave more.
There was 80 people?
About 80. It was
good.
yeah. You know what? It was fun by the end. Context for the listeners and viewers. Jason and I we did a show in a pizza restaurant in a Best Western motel, and it was an experience. The way it was designed. Half of the people on this side had their backs to us because the way the booth was, they could not turn around. It was like a pillared booth. It was a lot.
Do you need to see the comedian when you're?
I'm very physical. I'm very physical on stage.
Oh, okay.
And so
We were trying different things.
I gave the guy a head massage at one point. I just walked over and just started massaging his head. So.
Yeah, right. I started doing chiropractic adjustments just to why not? You know what I mean? And I'm not a chiropractor, I can tell you.
The places that comedy takes you. That's
yes.
a pizza parlor.
Yes.
Wow, we have so much to get into.
Oh yes, for sure.
We do. We do.
So you grew up in San Francisco, correct? And that's where you started comedy?
I moved around a lot as a kid, but I was born in Santa Rosa, then moved to San Rafael, Concord, Santa Rosa, Rohnert Park, San Francisco. Financial struggles for my parents.
They weren't in the Army or anything.
No, that would be funny though. We just did a tour of Bay Area Army bases.
So you've lived in just one place your whole life, sounds like. It's been great.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I started comedy in San Francisco.
Okay.
To me, it's the best place to start comedy in America.
Oh, really?
From what I hear, Boston's also a really good one. But it's big enough that there's a lot of shows, a lot of opportunities, but it's small enough that it's, not like LA where
saturated.
It's just so saturated. And there's also less so now because they're pulling so much from the internet, but there's still that feeling of like, hey, you never know, the head of CAA could be in the audience tonight. Whereas there, you can just kind of let it fly. Yeah. And the audiences too, what I loved about the Bay Area is, yes, San Francisco, is very specific in kind of the audiences you pull, but you drive an hour and a half, 2 hours in any direction, and you can get completely different kinds of audiences. And so it coming up, it gave me a lot of experience and a lot of reps, just learning how to connect with every possible. I mean, the audiences in San Francisco versus Oakland versus Sacramento versus Ukiah, versus Gilroy.
Are they conservative or liberal?
It varies completely.
Okay.
So, I'll stereotype it, but San Francisco, Oakland, pretty liberal. Gilroy's more rural, so it's that's where they make all the garlic and it's kind of near Salinas and all that. So
I remember when I went there, my wife she wouldn't get very close to me later on that evening.
Yeah, so. And actually you smell you do you drive through Gilroy, you can actually smell the garlic through your car like that.
Wow.
But and then Sacramento, very drunk. The audience is in Sacramento in a good way.
Sacktown.
The Sacramento Punchline. I will tell you that comedy club. I love doing it. It's like I always call it like a hitter's ballpark because like every show except the late show Friday, you're just any bit you throw out there usually is going to do well. Late show Friday gets a little rowdy. Little people have been drinking for a long time. They're a little tired. But in general though, it's just it's just a really nice kind of mix. So I started there.
It's interesting. Yeah, we have a lot of comedian friends that started out in San Francisco and have come over, and they've talked about how different the scene is over there compared to here, but also how it was amazing because it taught them so much and gave them a little taste of what to expect before they came to LA.
Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah.
Is it drastically different when you start out? Or
so here's one thing I'll say, and then I'll get to the LA part. One thing I'll say, it's also the San Francisco comedy scene is drastically different now than when I started, because I started 15 years ago. and at that point in time, you had the club, you had the Punchline, you had Cobb's, you had the major comedy clubs, and you had a couple indie shows. There was an indie comedy club run by the San Francisco Comedy College that it went under a little bit later, but for a while it was really cool. But other than that, there were like no indie shows. Even the open mic scene, there were like 4 open mics. Wow. It was not, and now, especially in the internet age, over the past few years, so many independent comedy producers have popped up to where there are indie shows that are basically operating as comedy clubs where they're doing like 5 shows a weekend and all over San Francisco, even Oakland, East Bay. So there's so much more opportunity for stage time in San Francisco now than there was then. So even more so now, in a way it's almost too easy now in San Francisco because like the contrast from there to here is like, oh wow, that like it. But for me, it was a big smack in the face coming from San Francisco to LA because I had done comedy 7 or 8 years in San Francisco before I moved to LA. And when you're in San Francisco, everyone's in comedy for the love of the game, especially at that point in time because you didn't quite have the social media proliferation. It was when I started, like if you were doing comedy, it was because you loved doing stand-up or you had some sort of mental illness that you really wanted to,
it's always one or the other.
Yeah, one or the other. But it was very clear, but then I remember the first open mic I tried to go to, a buddy of mine, he was like, oh yeah, you go to the open mic at the West Side Comedy Theater. And so he's like, yeah, I get there maybe an hour, 2 hours early, whatever. So I get there, I'm standing in line, and the first 25 people get on, and I'm counting, and I'm like, I'm right on the line. I'm like, so I wait that hour, and there were like 6 people in front of me who were all kind of buddies talking, and 6 people behind me all talking. And almost all of them were a year or less in. At least 4 to 5 of them were like, my agent just said, I'm spending too much on improv classes, so I need to start doing open mics to kind of just continue to be be
Oh,
and
wow.
then there was a guy who was like 2 years in, and he was like the sensei, like he was talking as though like he knew everything about comedy.
There's always one of those.
Yeah, always.
And I was just and it was like the apathy towards comedy itself was like, whoa, like, and that's not to say that's how all comedians in LA are. There's a million comedians in LA, so you get all kinds. But it was like I'd never really experienced that. And when I would come to LA and perform when I lived in San Francisco, it was amazing because when you're an out-of-towner and you come to LA, it's so much easier to get spots, especially like I had been doing comedy a long time. I knew people. And so when I came down here, I was like, oh, that'll be the same thing. Like I was getting up at, the Improv and all these like, indie shows, and then as soon as I lived here, it was like I had leprosy. It was like I couldn't get on anything.
Isn't that it's an interesting dynamic?
Well, I think it's because to be fair to the bookers, they're so bombarded with people coming at them, and so I think there's an expectation that if you live in LA, you're going to be hitting them up like every 20 seconds trying to get on their shows. So as soon as you're a resident, it's like, okay, we'll get to you later. We'll kind of keep you at arm's length. And also it takes so much more kind of footwork to get in, which I was used to the Bay Area where I was in at all the clubs. I was kind of the equivalent there of like if you are in LA and you have a lot of TV credits and you're a star in LA, then you can get up anywhere. So I was kind of used to that of like, and so it was it was a shock to the system coming down and being like, hey, can I get on that thing?
I'm
like,
here now.
Excuse me, we'll leave that on read, or seen, not reply on that message.
That's crazy. That's a good tip though, like for people who are trying to reach out to bookers. Maybe, I'm not saying to lie, maybe say you're out of town, like maybe.
It's tough. I mean, you could try that, but it is hard because you can maybe get by with that once, but once you start, people will kind of know. And the other thing that I didn't do is I didn't hang out enough initially. Like, and it wasn't to say I wasn't getting any spots, but I didn't quite realize how social the LA scene was.
The culture.
Yeah, and how much it was okay, you want to get on at that show? You should come hang out at that show like, once or twice before you. And I just, there was a lot going on personally, and I was doing stuff on the road a fair amount. So, and I was already, you know, with my now wife. And so it's hard when, and especially now that I have kids, you know, it's like we have 2 kids. If I'm gone, you know, for a week or, you know, 10 days and I come home and I'm like, honey, I'm going to go hang out at the Comedy Store till 1 a.m. to maybe get a 5-minute set. You know, that's
true. It's true.
It can be a tough sell to my wife.
It is. And I just wanted to preface to our audience, when David's talking about going to a show and getting on the show, that is part of the culture in comedy.
The job, too.
The job. We can't really explain why that happens, but it's a thing, and going to shows leads to getting on shows.
I can tell you why it's a thing, because it's a whole lot harder to turn someone down to their face than in a text message. So, and you know, no one answers phone calls anymore.
Yeah.
It's that is so, you know, but I'm happy I moved to LA, because even though, you know, it's been a mixed bag in terms of success, opportunities, whatever, it is nice that there is that energy of, you know, there are those possibilities.
Yeah.
And even though there aren't as many people who are down here kind of for the love of the game with stand-up, you know, everyone here, for the most part, is really committed about this being a career for them. And it's something that they're really serious about, which, again, the San Francisco comedy scene now, you do have more of those people.
Yeah.
But at the time that when I was there, it was a lot more, you know, they loved stand-up, but they also loved, you know, just hanging out, you know, just smoking weed.
I noticed
you know.
that, though, but that's the culture thing, especially out here. I've noticed the hanging out or like doing mics just to make your friends laugh. I'm like, that's your money. You're spending $5 here just to joke around with your friends. What are we?
And it's true, and I do say sometimes, because I'll get newer comics, you know, asking me for advice, and I'll tell them, honestly, open mics, especially in LA, can be counterproductive to your development as a comedian.
Wow.
They can be. Not all open mics are the same. There's some open mics that are great, but I find that, and I don't do open mics anymore really, but if I found that, you know, if this mic is all comedians, so you have an audience of all comedians, and comedians in LA, so they're doubly jaded, because, you know, you go to an open mic in you know, Topeka, and there's still some novelty to those comedians about stand-up. That's right. Here it's like there is no.
It's hilarious though, the difference of like when you get the jaded and it's like,
and the stuff that's going to work for that audience of jaded comics, I would say 90 to 99% of the time, for a real audience of people, is not going to work.
Yeah.
Right.
And so what you find, and what I find, is a lot of comedians coming up, especially in that scene, are the too cool for school comedians. Where it's like, you know, where it's like,
true.
You know, and now I sound like I'm, you know, 80, but you know,
back in my day, David Studebaker,
But it's like there's that, and it also, I find, creates a callousness towards real audiences. And for me, like, there's two reasons why every show, even the pizza cookery, I go 1,000%, and I give it everything I have, and I try to give as great of a performance as I can. So there's 2 reasons. Number one, you know, a lot of times people who aren't, you know, especially living in LA where they have 9 friends who are comedians and they have to go to shows, a lot of people, that may be the only live comedy show they ever go to, is at that pizza cookery.
It's true.
Yeah.
And if I go up there and I'm like, I phone it in, or I'm like, you know, these people, you know, what is that? If I do that and I don't put on a good show, they may never go to another show ever again. So I'm hurting the comedy community as a whole, and I'm hurting, obviously, myself, because I'm a part of that. So I'm always cognizant of, like, this is an opportunity to, like, either kill or birth a live comedy fan.
Yeah.
So and also, you know,
that's right.
Like, a lot of these places, even when it's a free show, they're charging a lot for food and beverages,
drinks,
and especially if there's a cover charge, like that. You know, that's important to me. So, but the other reason why, you know, I always try to, I don't try to do the, like, that set was for me kind of a thing, or like you know, I like I hate this audience, or even like, you know,
it was the audience guys.
That guy got olives on his pizza. Screw him.
Well, and honestly, I don't blame I almost never blame an audience for being bad. What I usually will blame is the setting and the setup. Like for me, in my 15 years, if the setup is proper, if the sound is good, if people can see me, if there's not, you know, like during your set there was a guy like smashing pans in the pizza, you know, they're like, you know,
I was like, sir, could you please stop smashing those pans? I'd appreciate it. Trying to do some crowd work here.
Yeah. So I know that I can at least get by. Like I can do enough to entertain these people and at least feel good. So. But the other thing is I do a fair amount of crowd work, but I have always, ironically, I'm wearing my Mr. Rogers shirt.
I was going to say,
I love Mr. Rogers.
Love that shirt. Love that shirt.
Sorry, I didn't mean to hit the mic. I love Mr. Rogers. But I've always looked at my shows as, like, my family, when I was younger, we would all do like Sunday dinners. And sometimes we'd invite friends or, you know, other family members or whatever. And I look at my show as like, I've invited this audience to a Sunday dinner. And if I invite you to, if I invite you guys to my Sunday dinner, I'm not gonna be like, I don't really curse. Am I allowed to say how
you can say whatever you want.
This is a very restricted podcast.
I never know. Yeah. But I wouldn't be like, look at this fucking guy's stupid face. You know? Like, what the hell is wrong with you?
As he looks right at me.
Yeah, like, you're like, really? You wore that outfit today? Like, I'm like, why?
Look at this schmagegi.
Yeah.
It's so great that you're saying that, because there are, like, I think people forget that the audience is there to have a good time.
Yeah.
And like, I've had shows where people get super racist, and I get it. Like, racism gets you laughs. Yeah. Okay, there's a certain thing you can say.
It doesn't get me laughs, but some people.
Well, some people it's an easy, and I'm like, okay. But then when you're starting to make the audience uncomfortable and you're doubling down, it's time to pull out. You know,
and you see that,
and people don't care. And I'm like, people have DM'd me after shows like, I don't know why that happened. It made me uncomfortable. Thank you for saying something.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you just not caring about the audience? They're here.
I mean, there's a profound level of narcissism in our industry, and so you do get that. But I like that. But you're right, and also, like, you know, I mean, I respect comedians who are, you know, who have opinions on things, who are willing to go out on a limb on stage. So I'm not hating on that, but personally, for me and what translates well for my comedy and who I am, and just what I enjoy. That's the same thing of, like, if I invite you again, I invite you to my dinner, and I know that you have a political view that's different than mine, or whatever. I'm not going to be the first one to come at you with that. Like, I really do want my shows to be a kind of a leaving this time, and kind of, and even that's part of why on stage I'll often wear like retro shirts. Like, I'll wear shirts that are like I'll wear Beatles shirts, or like old vintage Disneyland shirts, or Mr. Rogers, because even visually, like, I want to take people, and the comedy I do, sometimes I'll talk about things happening right now, but for the most part, I try to do as many things to create a world that's kind of outside the here and now, so that when they come to my show, it's just a complete release, and it can be people of all backgrounds just being in the same room, enjoying each other. And so, and then with crowd work, the most important thing that ever happened for me with crowd work was a class I took where, I'll shout the guy out, Joe Klosik. He's a legendary San Francisco comedian.
Joe Klosik.
And he taught a riffing class, and this is, I was like a few months in, so it was 14, 15 years ago, and he told a story in that class, because I was starting to do crowd work right away, because I loved, the first time I ever saw stand-up, I was 14, and the comic, which I can tell that story, but the comic did a lot of crowd work, and I was in the front row, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing, because like, back then you didn't have like YouTube's, you just saw like Comedy Central, you just saw like specials where it's like Jerry Seinfeld in big theater. You didn't see like, oh, I'm like this close to, and he's really making fun of me, and I enjoyed that. So I was but there was like a feeling when I started where, like, I had to just immediately make fun of them, and I didn't that's just because that's what I had seen from that comic, and then a couple others. And when I started, I was a little I was like 18, 19. I was angrier. I was in a different space, but
just an angry 18, 19-year-old just heckling the hell out of everybody.
Yeah. Well, and also like I felt like I felt you were supposed to be edgy, and I was told by like older comedians, oh yeah, you got to be edgy, you got to be more angry.
But what does that mean? Edgy for you?
Well, that's the thing. I look like a sad Culkin brother. Like no one wants to be yelled at by me. So
stop your yelling. Man.
Is that you've been hiding that all this time? You're the other Culkin brother, aren't you?
The long lost. I didn't get any of their money. But he told a story in the class when he was talking about how, again, the same thing. He was using that example of how, you may do hundreds, thousands of shows, but this may be such a seminal moment for this audience member. Mm-hmm. So, and he told a story of where an audience member, it was a guy's birthday. He sat front row and he was with his whole family, and Joe just was ripping the guy and kind of went harder on him than was like warranted, and made up some line that was funny, but like it was just a little too mean-spirited.
Oh, really? Okay.
And like a few years later, that guy came to one of Joe's shows and afterwards said, hey Joe, do you remember me? And Joe's like, I don't remember. He's like, oh, on my birthday, you did some joke, and now every year on my birthday, my family rips on me. And it was like not like a rip on like a fun way. It was like a really like something that I don't remember what it was, but something that Joe like actually genuinely felt really bad about. And like forever now, like it basically ruins this guy's birthday. Like and so he was just saying like we don't think of it because for us like in our minds, stand-up comedy is kind of like cage fighting in a way of like, kill or be killed. We're in there. They'll turn on us if we're bad. Like, so we have kind of like a fighter's mentality.
We do.
Oh, you're not laughing at that?
Yeah, and so we have, and so we're the vulnerable ones in that state. But we forget that like, that we have real power up there. And so when you have someone, that's something that can live with someone forever. So that's the other thing. And like, again, I'll give you another example. I did a show. I do a lot of private events and things like that. And there was a show I did for a recovery community, a drug rehab or drug recovery community. And there was a daughter of one of the folks in it, and she was maybe 14, 15, and she stood up just right in the middle of my set, like just in the middle of the audience, just totally not out of the blue, and just started talking about how she loves to ride horses and stuff like that, and it was something where like, and almost any other comedian, because this wasn't like an easy setup for comedy, and so not any other comedian, but a lot of comedians would use that because it was like it was a easy hanging slider right down the middle of the plate that you could have just like you could have run wild with it, done really well, but not, but in that moment again, hurt that kid and made the whole, and just, changed the vibe of the situation. And thankfully I had a story, I had a bit that revolved around horses and was very self-deprecating towards me. And so it worked out fine. And then people came over and talked to her. But it's just, there's those moments that come up where, or a woman, it's on my Instagram, a woman came up and just came on stage very drunk, took the mic out of my hand at the end of it's like the end of an hour-long set, took the mic, and you can see like how I handled it on there. But it was one of those things where I went soft on her. I could have gone harder. I went soft on her. I let her tell the joke. I did some material, but I didn't go too hard. And afterwards, someone had explained, that she's going through a really tough time in her life, yada yada yada.
Right.
Doesn't excuse someone, I was also harder on the bouncer who just watched it happen and didn't even move.
Yeah.
But so
it's their only job, sir.
Yeah, right.
But you see that happen more times than not, where somebody will come on the stage, and as a comic, you've got to be prepared for anything at any time.
And if you're listening out there or watching, don't go on the stage. I will invite audience members on stage
unless you're invited.
I will invite them but don't go on stage
because it's a violation of a person's space. People forget we're human beings too. So it's
dangerous. Like I don't know. I knew that it was, and also full disclosure, he had just walked away. Long story. Well, James Creviston, our friend who booked the Pizza Cookery, great guy. He's one of my dearest friends. Great comic. He sometimes still trains in cage fighting, but he used to like cage fight. He's a veteran. He opens for me a lot and is my personal security a lot. So he was like posted next to the stage the whole time. And then he had to go to the back for my sound cue. The long story, but it was just in that window that she came up right when he had moved.
Yeah.
But I knew,
you could diffuse it.
I could diffuse it, and/or James was there, so it wasn't going to go too far before there was things.
It's nice when your openers also can you got to be careful because he's going to beat you up pretty good if you mess it up.
We're just now seeing people getting stuff thrown. Like that's a violation of space.
And I've been punched at shows.
Tell us about that.
Okay, so I'll be nice. I won't name the cruise line that it happened on, but it was at a kid-friendly show. So it was I was the only comic. It was like I would do a show every night, and like first night is kid friendly, second night adult only, and they often, like a few different times, the host would be like, "Who here wants to see some adults only comedy?" And the whole theater would roar, and they go, "Well, you came on the wrong night. This is the kids show." And then they would all boo, and they go, "And now David Studebaker."
Oh, no.
So that was the intro. So I would have them play music, and I'd come out and I'd go into the theater bottom, and I would kind of dance and high five people, kind of change the energy, come back on stage, and as I'm coming back, I'm walking towards the steps. I'm passing this table, and this guy's like, "I'm going to punch you in the nuts." And I'm like,
"Okay.
No, you're not."
Yeah.
And I turn, and he haymakers me and catches me in the ass. Wow. And I'm like, and there's no security in this big theater. Like, I'm alone.
Isn't there cameras everywhere on the cruise?
I don't know. Maybe, but not. It's an older ship. It's a very old ship.
Right.
And so I... And also the kid friendly show was like at 10:30 p.m. at night on a booze cruise. Like there were like 4 kids there.
Weird,
but I was like, I'm not going to ruin it for the 4 kids.
So you got the spring break crew that came in.
Oh yeah. This was. This is a very much like it's a 2-night cruise where like they come just to get hammered.
Oh yeah.
So I get on the stage and I'm like, I'm gonna power through. But this guy is like, he keeps like staring at me with this crazy look in his eyes. And I'm like, so finally I'm like, oh yeah, the guy wanted to punch me in the nuts. And he stands up and he shouts, "Yeah, and I'll do it again." And he runs out of the theater. And I'm like, oh, well, okay, now I'm on a floating prison with this psychopath. Like, what do I do with that?
Right.
And there was a woman next to him. And I was like, who was sitting next to him at the time, I was like, did you know that guy? Because some people do sit like with other people. And she goes, "No, I've never seen him before in my life." Turns out later security said that's his wife.
Nice cover up. Yeah. He went that way.
Yeah, exactly. Jeez. And she stayed and enjoyed the show. And so yeah. And then like, and yeah, so that's one of many reasons why, I've not done much cruising anymore. But yeah, so it can be dangerous, and especially it's getting more and more dangerous, which actually, again, is another reason why I'm thankful that I've, over many years, built a style of comedy that generally doesn't piss people off and doesn't provoke that sort of thing. Yeah. But also, the way I do my show, I try to be very big on stage and try to have kind of a dominant presence where, and I go to the audience before they can go to me. Not even in a mean way, just in a I see you kind of way. Even if I'm complimenting someone, it's like I'm like
locked in.
I'm locked in, and I'm in the room, and I know what's going on. Because sometimes when people heckle or they do stuff like that, it's often where the comedian isn't super in tune with what's going on. Maybe they're not having a great set, and the audience member wrongfully thinks they're helping by shouting something out or doing something, and sometimes, and also it just can put them back on their heels initially of like, if I come up there and I'm not crazy tall, but I'm 6 feet 6'1", so on a stage I tend to look bigger than I am. And so it just kind of, I find that just initial, and I don't always go right into crowd work or doing that, but even I'll do a bit and then I'll use the intro for a bit to include someone. So just so
I find that works really well.
So it's very clear that we're, I'm seeing everything that's going on. I'm here. We're a team. Let's.
It's more like you're not talking at them, but to them, and it makes them.
Yeah.
I've been to concerts where I've left because it felt like they weren't really even engaging. Yeah. So it's like, same type of thing.
100%. And your comedy, yes, is really warm. It's inviting, but it's big.
Thank you.
And it was cool to watch. Do you think that preparation over time led you to doing cruises?
No, actually. And I only did cruises maybe for like 5 or 6 months. What led me to doing cruises is having 2 kids and my wife being a stay-at-home mom and me being in financial straits and needing some money. But, and I always say with cruises, it's interesting because there are comedians, you're kind of either, I've never met someone who's kind of, mixed on cruises. Usually people are very much like, they love it. It's they really, it works for them. Or comedians where it just, and a lot of it's the life. And a lot of it for me, why I resisted it for so long and why it's just not, I'm not that I wouldn't do them, but like it's I prefer land. It's weird saying land gigs, but I prefer
land to sea.
Because from a standpoint of just also being like a parent, sometimes like a buddy of mine, he did a 3-month run on Royal Caribbean.
Wow.
And it's not always that way. A lot of times it's a week or 2 weeks, but it's an extra day of travel. Sometimes you don't have Wi-Fi. You're very disconnected. You're in other parts of the world. And I, with 2 young kids, and also I love my kids and I love my wife, so I like to be home and I like to be connected.
I'm one of the people who loves.
Some people are like, no, it's great.
Wow, look at you! You're a unicorn now these days. No, just kidding. Nah.
But some people are like, oh yeah, it's nice. I've got no Wi-Fi, honey. Sorry, but no. So I don't like that feeling of being so disconnected. And also, I'm not I don't drink, I don't do drugs. I'm not like on stage I'm very like fun and it's a party, but like off stage I am like I'm gonna go back and eat my crackers alone in my hotel room kind of a guy. So it also just the culture of it just wasn't it wasn't quite, again, not saying I wouldn't do it again, but it did work in a certain sense with doing cruises, but cruises are tough, especially when you have to do separate long sets where you can't repeat any material.
I heard that. So they don't let you repeat any material at all,
It
right?
depends on the line. Carnival, they ask you, I haven't done Carnival, but Carnival they ask you to do, you need to have 3 separate 30-minute sets.
Wow.
And then you can repeat 2 of them because usually you do 5 shows on a run. So, and then one has to be kid friendly, one has to be dirty, and then one is like whatever you want.
What is the prepreparation like for something like that?
I'm sure that gets.
Well, I mean, for me, I'm very analytical with everything I do, and I'm very organized. So for me, like I had an Excel spreadsheet where, because the one I did, you had to have a kid friendly and an adult. Thankfully, they didn't make you be dirty for the adult one. It was just kind of whatever you want to do. Yeah. But I had like an Excel spreadsheet where I had like every bit that fit for each, and kind of I'd mix and match. And then also because I'm free flowing, so I'll have like a game plan for what I do. I'll write out every bit I want to do in a set. But then often, depending on the flow of the crowd and who I have, and just kind of strains of thought and whatever's happening, I'll mix and match. So I would have to, and I kind of go into an altered state when I'm on stage. I move really fast. So I'll get off stage sometimes and I'm like, I don't even know what just happened. And so I would have to listen before the next night. I would have to listen back and write down everything I did the night before, so that, because it would happen. And sometimes, like, if I wasn't sleeping well, because I did not sleep well on the cruises, and they fly you out in a red eye, and I don't sleep on planes, and so I was just, so I'd be in the middle of a set, and I had to write down, like, I'd have a whole sheet of, like, for that second show of the stuff I could do, because there were a couple times before I started really doing that where I'd go into a bit and I'm like, I have no idea if I did this yesterday. And you'll get like complaints from people like he repeated like a single bit.
It's that hardcore.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. No. And I also didn't know that like that because the comment cards are like and online reviews are like you're supposed to like politic for that, like to make sure that hey, make sure you fill out if you enjoyed the show, fill it out, because if you don't politic for that, you tend to, and also they don't. This one didn't give out cards. It was just like an email. And if you liked something, you're less likely to like fill something out rather than if you hated something. So
those retirees are really brutal, aren't they?
Yeah. And it's funny. The crazy thing about that cruise, I got my first 2 nights doing it. I got a standing ovation at the end of the kids show and the adults only show back to back. And I was like, wow, this cruise thing is really nice. And then it started the lack of sleep. I got like 14 hours my first like 5 nights or 4 nights on there. And like the life of it started wearing me down. And so by day 5, I was like I'd been out at sea for like 10 months, and I'm like a pirate. I don't know how much I can do. It's just gonna be tough.
There's David just jumping off the ship, swimming as fast as he can.
No, and I only did like 8 or 9 night runs each time, but it was there were times that I kind of got figured out, but I mean we can get off the cruise. I didn't want to go too deep. This is the we're talking about the road, not the sea.
I want to go
because get back to the road
because you do have a family. Like, is that? Are you? I know cruises is one, but how else are you making money? And are you booking your own?
Oh yeah,
shows?
So, and that's the other reason why it's funny because cruises are interesting to people. But like, I mean,
it's not
I've been doing comedy 15 years, and that was like 24 shows total of So my wife's a stay-at-home mom. Comedy is my only income. I do. So, which means, and I'm not, I'm not internationally famous. So it means I have to do like
the legwork.
Yeah, and I have to say yes to everything, and I have to do, any sort of like venue. Because I do a lot of corporate events, private parties, virtual events. I mean, if it pays, and I'm not having to like do porn or something. I'll do it.
There is comedy porn, David.
True. Listen, I book everything myself. Yeah. And I'm on some booking websites, and a lot of things are word of mouth, and there's there's clubs I do, and then and thankfully because I can work clean, it opens up a lot of avenues. Like if I couldn't work clean, I could not support the family. It just basically, unless you're really famous, unless you're or even if you're like you're a national headliner where you can headline even like B or C rooms every week of the year. Unless you're at that level as a comedian, you have to work clean. And that was another thing really early on in my career that an older comedian told me, where he said, like, he asked, do you want to do this as a career? And I said, yes. He's like, well, then you need to work clean.
Yeah.
Because
true.
You will, if you're in it if you want to make money, you have to be able to do it. And I always recommend, if comics ask me, it's not just about being clean. It's also about not being depressing. Because so many clean shows, yes, you can get by without being, with just not being dirty, but if you're also super depressing, they often won't ask you back. Because like you can be really dark. You can be like not say a curse word.
Someone just gets on stage and like, I'm gonna kill myself.
But I didn't say a cuss word.
Yeah, I know, but
it's totally cool.
Yeah, but like there can be material and jokes that are like that. Yes, you didn't curse. It's not like sexual or whatever, but it's like. I mean, you can talk about killing a dog or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not like that wasn't dirty, but like I don't want. Yeah, and especially if it's like a clean show or like a corporate event or stuff like that. Like they want to just like I know when I'm being hired for like a corporate event, I'm just the dancing. The dancing monkey. They want me to just dance around, make them laugh. I'm not there to make them think or to be really edgy or dark or whatever.
That's the difference, and I'm glad that you said that. There's a difference when you're trying to, you have this plan of, I want to work consistently, I want to make money, I want to be around for a long time. And I think some people get into it, they're like, okay, let's see what I can do. And then there's burnout. Yeah. And that's real. People don't talk about the burnout.
Well, the burnout, yes. And also as if you're a younger comedian who's, one of the ways people burn out too is they're not getting opportunities, or they're not making enough money, or they're struggling. And as a newer comedian, the other reason why it's really important to be able to work clean is there are headliners, national headliners, who are filthy, but they request that their openers be clean. So there's been especially, like the Punchline in San Francisco and Cobb's and all those, I regularly will be a feature act for, a week of shows there. And also back when in my hosting days there, same thing. There would be weeks where, because I was known as like one of the cleaner comics in the area, there were weeks where they would say, hey, they asked for someone clean, you're the one. And then I'd look at the comedian that I'm with, I'm like, they want me to be clean? Like, what? And then I realized, I was like, oh. And
it's
then
balance.
As I got deeper into it, I realized, like, and as I talked to them, as I got deeper into my career, or as I did those weeks, they want to be the first one to shock the audience with that.
I get that.
They don't. If you've just gone up there and humped the stool and just done like really like, or been super offensive or whatever, there's less ground for them. They then have to raise the level of shock even more. So even then, it's like you're increasing your odds there. Now, I say all this with the caveat of, do whatever you want to do as a comedian. I am the most anti-comedy dogma person. Do whatever you feel is right, because your pathway, like this could be a pathway to you getting more work and me supporting a family, but your pathway could be, hey, you're super dirty and you mine that to superstardom. Maybe you don't make as much money going up. You have to have a day job or whatever, but you reach heights that are really high. So, and even from a like material generation standpoint, and I get it, it's one of my biggest pet peeves in comedy when I hear comedy teachers or comedy coaches or just comedians in general say, this is how you have to write jokes, or this is how you have to be on stage.
Right.
So that's why I always say everything I say is, this works for me. This may be things that work to get these sorts of gigs. But like, I'll give you a great example. Like, there were comedy books I read, especially when I was starting. I took some comedy classes where the teacher would say, in order to write comedy, you have to, the way to do it is you think of something that really makes you angry and angsty and really makes you uncomfortable, and then write that, and then that'll be the joke. Yep. Or they'll say, or they'll say, in terms of your performance
anger, they say connect with the emotion of anger.
Yes.
Well,
anger,
there's a lot of
angst, or what frustrates you, or just, and again, there are people who do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of philosophy behind channeling that and then building comedy out of the stuff that like
and that's a method. But I'll give you an example, and then I have another pet peeve I'll get to as well. So I'll give you an example. For me and my style, when I write about something that really makes me mad or really pisses me off, that bit almost never works. Because who I am on stage, it's not consistent with who I am on stage. And I've had some struggles in my life. I've gone through a lot of stuff, but in terms of how I dress, how I look,
your energy,
my energy, I don't look or seem like someone who's been through some really rough stuff.
Right.
So it's like to an audience who doesn't know me, they're like,
shut up.
Yeah, come on.
We don't believe
this. And then also it's like hard. It's like I can't, like, so much of my material is fun and all that. So if I go from like doing, a goofy bit about, Celine Dion to like, let me tell you about the Middle East. It's like, it's so jarring. And so, but also because of how, like I talked about I view it as like my Sunday dinner is my show, is I find that when I write material about things that I love, that I find kind of inherently funny. I'll give an example. The Reading Rainbow is one kind of a classic, one of my older bits. But that was my favorite show as a kid, and I love the show. So, but it's one of my most popular bits because I love it, but I also can poke fun at it.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. So, because that's the same thing. Like I love you guys. I love my family. I can, in a Sunday dinner kind of way, poke fun at you guys. So, again, when I was being told to write from angst and anger, it just didn't work. It was jarring. As soon as I and sometimes there's things that genuinely do annoy me that'll work, but again, it never reaches the core of you. It never reaches the level of hate. A lot of times it's like something that it's just kind of absurd to me, and then that's kind of the highest level I go is absurdity. But then also, like, in terms of joke writing, it frustrates me. There's so many comedy books out there where they teach the mathematical approach to stand-up, to writing jokes.
Yep.
And that was something, again, where, like, when I took comedy classes early on, I was like, I'm not a math person, and I write out of feel. And they teach that, okay, you can sit down, you can take this first story, second story premise, this diagram.
Yeah.
You put words into these diagrams, you do a misdirection, and people will laugh. And again, yes, there are people who, their brain works that way, and they can sit down and go, hey, I'm going to write 100 jokes about Cheese Whiz today, or, and,
right.
and you can use that. But there was nothing in those books that I found, or at least the ones that I read, and nothing in those classes that said, hey, this may not work for you.
Yeah.
Because because they can't teach feel. Mm-hmm. So there's people, like, for me, I basically never can sit down and write let me just write a joke.
Oh, no.
For me, 99% of my best bits come from, I'm just talking in conversation. I'm talking to my wife. I'm talking to my parents, whatever. I have no friends, just my wife and parents. And I'll just say, like, I'll just be talking, and then they'll laugh. I'll laugh, like, oh, that could be something. And then I'll just kind of think about it. I'll make a note, and then I'll kind of broaden that out into how do I communicate that to a big audience, and then you try it out on stage. It's totally a feel thing. They can't teach feel, and so to preserve their money and to be able to, because what they want to tell you is, hey, if you come to this class, I can turn you into a comedian.
Yeah.
And in a way, they can.
Yeah.
Like I always say, those classes and those books, they can teach just about anyone to have a serviceable 5 to 7 minute set. Because just about anyone has enough things about themselves and can plug enough things into those diagrams.
Yep.
I think it's important to find, especially the community that works for you. Because I did take 2 classes with 2 lovely women, Lisa Sunstead and Leslie Wolf. Shout out to y'all. And they were more emotional, and that worked for me. It was like working off of like what you feel, your intuition and stuff, and that worked for me. But what you're saying, I'm like, a diagram, sit down and write. Like, I get ideas in a car when I'm driving, and I'm like, I'm in the car like, I hope they don't arrest me. I'm over here trying to write a joke.
I totally agree. And I think that's something where it's hard to teach, and you have to have that natural talent. Mm-hmm. So again, I get why they teach it that way, but it frustrates me in terms of there's not enough of that sort of teaching approach that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives false hope in a certain sense, in terms of someone takes that class, they maybe do come up with that, and they do that, but then they're not really prepared for what comes next, and building out beyond that 5 to 7 minutes.
Glad you said that.
Some of them are. Again, there's a good chunk of people where they can take that teaching, they can take that method, and they can really do that for a long time.
Yeah.
And that can be their career and how they do it. But I just wish there was more of a sense of, there was more of a, here's another pathway that's harder in a certain sense to communicate, and that also is honest in terms of like, you may not, this may not work for you. And I on both levels. So like, I wish day one I had heard, and maybe it's changed. I mean, again, this was a long time ago, but I wish day one I had heard someone say, hey, this thing we're teaching may totally not work for you.
Yeah.
And if you're writing this way and it's not working, do whatever. Just do whatever you think is funny.
Yeah.
And work it out on stage
That's the
and
best
do that.
advice I opened up like a couple of months into it. I got a manager and I opened up for a OG comedian. The best, she was like, you can say, she goes, let me tell you a secret. You can say whatever the fuck you want. I said, what? I said, what are you talking about? She goes, you can do what, watch. She got up there 2 hours straight.
Yeah.
Everyone laughing for 2 hours. And I was like, my God, she said whatever she wanted.
Yes.
I've never seen. I was like, there's an authenticity that people can lock in with.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is good advice. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's true.
And to me, if I were teaching one of these classes, and again, it's hard. I have charity for those people because they have to make a living. They have 30 people in here in a class. It's hard to kind of, but really, like, the class should be, the first 6 weeks is learn yourself. Like, figure out who you are, what's true to you. Maybe it is this book, this diagram thing. Maybe that's true to you. Maybe it's not, and so find who you are, and even with like the angst and anger. Like, I mean, I love Lewis Black is one of my favorite comedians. I love Lewis Black. He writes from a place of anger, and it's hilarious. It's amazing. When you go to Lewis Black, you want to hear him yell.
You want to hear him vent.
He has a bit that is one of maybe my favorite bit of all time, which is from Stark Raving Black, when he talks about having to follow Vince Gill and Amy Grant. Vince Gill's a 30-time Grammy-winning country singer. He's got a gorgeous voice, and his wife is a pop singer and gospel singer, and she's like the most famous gospel singer. And they're married, and they're in love. They're just like the most just wonderful, gorgeous, like musically. So he's just So the bit it's on YouTube. I think the bit is just him, backstage watching this happen and knowing that he has to, and this is a charity event, that he's got to go on after that and just start screaming at these people and be angry. And it was just, it's so, and I'm like, I go to Lewis Black, and the way that he did it was like really out of anger and all that. But it just, so again, writing out. So for him, yes, if you're Lewis Black, write out of anger.
That's who he is.
Find what pisses you off. Write out of anger. But like if you're me or or it could be anything. It could be a different lane. It could be just find who you are, what works, and play with that on stage. Because the most important thing is knowing who you are on stage, knowing how the audience is perceiving you, and knowing how you then can work with that and do that and find, and I don't teach classes, but I have been able to help some comics who I'm friends with really kind of turn their careers around or really get going in comedy because they were getting the wrong advice. They were doing what they thought they were supposed to do.
Right.
And I just was telling them, I just started telling them, this is how I perceive you, and this is how I see the audience perceiving you. Start playing with that. Start working with that.
I love
and
that.
it really changed the game.
I love
very
that.
cool, and it's really great insight. I also wanted to talk about your book because as comedians, we have to be comedypreneurs, and you have to have multiple streams of income coming in, right? So you wrote a book. Tell us about it.
You asked about that, Jason. What a great question.
Was it just there?
What a great question. I mean, man,
the magic of comedy, guys, right here.
Lone Star Lance, available on Audible and Amazon, or come to a show, get a signed copy, or you can go to my website, email me, I'll send you a signed copy.
Let's take a look at that, David, real quick.
Yes,
You can give it a
It's a good looking book right there,
Thank you.
Right
Connor
here, this
McCammon
beautiful book.
designed that cover.
Lone
Thank you.
Star Lance.
And it's funny with that book. Thank you for bringing it up. It connects up with something I've talked about earlier in terms of what I do comedically. So the book is a novel that it's a kind of mystery, thriller, comedy, but it's about kind of a family who it's a husband and wife. He's from San Francisco, she's from Texas. He's a playwright, she's a cop. And he's got to move in with his in-laws in Texas, and they're completely different. But it's about them kind of coexisting, and it's a book where it's been out for a few years now, 3 years. It's been really wonderful. It's gotten some great reviews and awards, and it's something where it's the most rewarding thing I've done in my career. Amazing. Because I've been able to kind of take my comedy ethos, but and I have a degree in screenwriting, so I finally got to put my writing degree to use. But kind of combine that with there's deeper themes in there, and kind of really communicate that. And it's made my comedy shows more rich, because both in terms of selling it after the show and otherwise, because when I'm doing these shows and I'm selling that after the show, that book really means a lot to me. So it also means a lot to make money. So I enjoy selling it, but also it's like, T-shirts sell really well, things like that sell really well.
When people like they want something.
Yeah, and they do want a souvenir. Yeah, but it's something where it's like, this is an extension of my comedy, but it's also something that, it's a feel-good story, but it has, deeper themes and meanings. So it's like, I can't do that on stage. I'm not, maybe some comedians can, but I'm not. When I'm on stage, again, I just try to entertain. So it really has been, it's been really gratifying. And I really, there's a sequel at some point in the works, but it's also interesting because this is something, we only have a couple minutes left, right?
A couple minutes.
It's something I want to say too, in terms of, for anyone who's who's a comedian or any sort of artist who is struggling or has had some setbacks in their career or whatever. I've had so many setbacks in my career. I was a year into doing comedy, and I was getting offers to do pilots for CBS and MTV. All these like things were coming in, and then I fell apart. My life fell apart, and then as soon as I got my life back together, and I was like, I'm doing comedy now out of love, and no offers came in. When it was all about my ego and anger, I was like, nothing but opportunities. But there's been near misses. We came really close to having my own show on one of the largest streaming networks, and there's been really close calls and things that derailed it that were crazy out of my control and just heartbreaking. But out of all those things, if that thing hadn't fallen through, I never would have written the book. And the book is whatever happens success-wise, the book's my favorite thing I've done. But also, if certain things that I really wanted, and I was like, I have to have that. If that had happened, I never would have met my wife. I never would have had my kids. My wife and my boys are I would give up everything for them. And so it's like, and in the end, it's like, that's, what are we doing this for? And what are we in life for?
What are we in life for?
What I try to do, sometimes I forget, but I try to do, I have a journal every night where I'll write down 3 things that I'm grateful for.
I do that in the morning.
But what I do is I try to also include bad things that have happened.
Oh.
So I will say, I'm a person of faith, so I will connect it up to, a higher, power, whatever you want to say.
Universe.
But
whatever.
but I always will write something that's bad too, because I'll use that moment to kind of take a step back and be like, okay, there's what's the larger thing happening here? And even if I can't see it, it's just a reminder of those setbacks that have happened in the past. And I could be a lot more, I could not be having to do, really rough gigs out in the middle of nowhere and driving 13 hours in a day and all that stuff. But it's the difficult times, and never, the last thing I'll say is never, comedy and careers are like the gym. If you're working out at the gym, never look at what the guy next to you or the woman next to you is lifting.
Woo!
Because if you look at what they're lifting,
clap it up for that,
and you try to do that, or you feel, oh man, I'm only doing this, let me try to do what they're doing, you're gonna hurt yourself.
True.
But if you just go do what every day, what's presented to you, what you feel like is the right thing, don't, as much as possible. I mean, obviously you want to be motivated. You don't want to be like, well, it's great. I got nothing going on, and I'm doing great. It's a balance, but definitely,
mind your own business.
The line I'll say is, who can say what is good and what is bad? There was an old story when my family's life fell apart. I was 10 years old. My dad nearly died. We lost everything. And we took a drive, and I was like, I was angry, I was unhappy, and my dad told some old, story. It's an old folk tale about a farmer with yams. But the line from it was, who can say what is good and what is bad? Yeah. And that's something I always try to remember is, who can say what is good and what is bad? And obviously you don't want to be like, oh, everything sucks, and thank you. I'm so glad everything sucks. But yeah, just always, keep that perspective. And yeah, so that's kind of, and buy Lone Star Lance, because the diapers are expensive.
You heard it, Lone Star Lance. That is the book to get on Amazon.
And on Audible, I did the narration. So if you want me to whisper sweet nothings into
David
your ear.
David Studebaker does it all on Lone Star Lance.
I love everything that you were saying. Okay, we got our important question we need to ask.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, take it away.
Okay, what is your favorite ice cream?
That is a fantastic question. I'm a fan of the show. I was ready for this. It is pineapple Dole Whip from Disneyland.
What?
And I'll give you
We've heard some interesting ones.
And on two levels. Number one, flavor. I love pineapple. I love tart and sweet. And if you're lactose intolerant, there's no dairy in it. So that's number one, just on a flavor standpoint. And I always heard people talking about it, and I was like, oh, people say it's overrated. It is not overrated. It's outrageously good. But the other level to it is my son, he loves Disneyland. I'm a huge Disneyland guy. I'm a total Disneyland, history nerd. And it is I got him like the cheapest SoCal season pass where you can go like on weekdays a lot. And it was like a birthday, Christmas, everything I could possibly throw together to get him. But it's like our special thing every time we go. He gets the Dole Whip. We just we just went the other day. We got it. We went in the tiki room. He's dancing to the birds and eating the Dole Whip. Yeah. My 4-year-old is the sweetest 4-year-old on the planet. I'm in love with him. And we're very bonded because during COVID, he was like a baby during COVID, and my wife was working at the time, and the world was shut down. So he we're very close. So the double whammy of not only do I love the flavor, but every time I taste it, it's usually with him. And if I'm not with him and I taste it, it reminds me of having fun with him. So pineapple Dole Whip from Disneyland. It's got to be from Disneyland, by the way.
Pineapple Dole Whip.
Wow.
We've heard a lot here.
Taste that.
We've heard a lot here on the Comedy Bro podcast. But the pineapple Dole Whip, I got to tell you.
Fancy, too.
Might take the cake here.
He might. Let's see who can top him. We'll see.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love everything you were saying.
I appreciate that. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
It was great. David Studebaker, everybody. We had a great time. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you. My pleasure.